Congressman Adam Schiff of California. Congressman, thanks for joining us.
You bet. Good to be with you, Will.
All right, so tomorrow morning we're all going to be hearing these words, the opening statement from the Director Comey's then going to be answering questions from the senators. The written testimony today, as you know, was so dramatic, describing what the president said in their meeting, specifically, first of all, on February 14th. He said this, and I'll put it up on the screen again. He then said, "I hope you can see your way clear to letting this go, to letting Flynn go. He is a good guy. I hope you can let this go." I replied only that he is a good guy. I did not say I would let this go. Do you believe this is evidence of obstruction of justice?
It's certainly very possible that this is evidence in combination with other actions by the president that could amount to obstruction. It's certainly an effort to interfere in the investigation. And I think the context is very important, Wolf. And one of the things we need to keep in mind in terms of when this is happening and how this is happening is that dinner that the president invites Mr. Director Comey to takes place the day after Sally Yates has gone to the White House to warn them about Michael Flynn. So the very next day, the president wants a dinner alone with Director Comey and asks for his loyalty. And then you flash forward a couple weeks. The day after Flynn is fired is the day that the president asked Comey to drop the Flynn investigation. Those are not coincidences in my view. The fact that the president effectively cleared the room of other people when he had these conversations, I think goes to the president's intent. But we also need to get answered those questions that were asked of Rogers and Coates today, because they provide some of the other context. And that is, did the president go to other people to ask them to intervene with Director Comey because he wasn't having enough success in getting Comey to drop the Flynn case?
Jeffrey Toobin, as you know, a former federal prosecutor. You're also a former federal prosecutor. Jeffrey believes it could be obstruction of justice. How high is that bar from your vantage point to go forward with a charge of obstruction of justice?
Well, you know, it's a high bar here because we're not really talking about whether you could bring a criminal charge against the president, whether you could prove beyond a reasonable doubt to a jury. The burden is in many ways much higher because the remedy here, if the president engaged in unlawful obstruction of justice, is removal from office. And there you really have to persuade the Congress as well as the country that this conduct was so disqualifying that it warrants that remedy, that this isn't just nullifying an election by other means. So that is the very practical standard. It's not as if Director Mueller is going to bring an indictment against the President of the United States. He may present evidence to the Congress. He may look at charges involving other people on obstruction, if that exists. But the question for the members of Congress is, does this meet the standard of removal from office? And that is a very high standard indeed.
Because in the House of Representatives, you would have to start that process of impeachment. That's potentially what you're talking about, right?
Well, that's the remedy. So when you ask, you know, does this meet the legal standard of obstruction, the more compelling question here, when the conduct involves the President of the United States, not an average person that can be brought up on charges, is does that conduct warrant the extraordinary remedy of removal from the highest office in the land?
You know, some of your Democratic colleagues, a few, have already reached that conclusion. I take it you have not.
You know, I think we're still early in getting the facts here. We even haven't had the testimony, the actual testimony of Director Comey. There are a lot of things I would like to ask him, in addition to, you know, all of the important contextual details that go around that factual statement, but also, who did he talk to about this? What is encapsulated in these memos? You know, we're going to need to know whether his account can be corroborated, because it's going to be contradicted by the White House. They're already trying to impeach Director Comey. I do think that, you know, frankly, most of us in Congress as well as in the country are going to be far more inclined to believe the director's account than the president's. But nonetheless, we're going to want to know, were these just pieces of a broader effort to obstruct or interfere in this investigation?
Comey's testimony, the written statement released today, also characterizes the president as very concerned over that secret, unsubstantiated, very salacious dossier written by a former British intelligence operative. Comey says the president, quote, once again, I'll put it up on the screen, he said he had nothing to do with Russia, had not been involved with hookers in Russia, and had always assumed he was being recorded when in Russia. He asked what we could do to lift the cloud. I responded that we were investigating the matter as quickly as we could, and that there would be great benefit if we didn't find anything to our having done the work well. He agreed, but then re-emphasized the problems this was causing him. When you read that section of the testimony, what was your reaction?
Well, like the rest of it, completely improper conduct by the president, but it looks like there are two separate issues here, and I hope that the director will clarify this tomorrow. One seems to be the desire by the president to get the director to help him make the cloud go away. And that is make the investigation go away. And the other is a more specific request by the president, and that is get information out there that I'm not a subject of the investigation. Those are two different things. They're two equally serious, well, one more serious, I should say, than the other, but equally troubling. But we need to get, I think, further information from Director Comey. Just what does he think the president was asking him, and how specific can he be about the president's exact words? Because the most important thing, of course, is what the president intended.
Were you surprised to read in Comey's testimony that he did in fact tell the president on 3 separate occasions that the president was not under investigation?
I was surprised by that, and frankly, I don't think that was appropriate for the director to do. I think that if there's a decision made to tell someone who's a potential subject of investigation that they're not a target of the investigation, that decision is made by the Justice Department. It's not made by the FBI. And here this again goes to, I think, the director overstepping the responsibility of the FBI and intruding on the prerogative of the Department of Justice. I have to say I do have some questions also about the logic and the rationale that I couldn't raise these concerns with the department because the Attorney General was going to recuse himself. I don't think any of us knew that until the moment that he announced it. Clearly the president didn't know that, so I'm not sure that the director could say that with such certitude. But there was an acting person in that role who the director could have gone to, and the fact that there may have been an expectation that he wouldn't be there indefinitely is also, to me, not a compelling reason not to bring this to the attention of the Justice Department. I think that the appropriate thing here would have been to say to the president, as he did in part, these questions you need to direct to the Justice Department, not to the director of the FBI.
What does the written testimony from Comey tell you about how forthcoming he'll be during tomorrow's hearing before the Senate Intelligence Committee?
I think he'll be fully forthcoming. Look, a lot of us have issues with Director Comey and the exercise of his judgment over the last couple of years, but none of us think that he is dishonest. None of us think that he is going to go testify untruthfully. We may have other issues, but that is not one of them. And I think if the White House is going to try to call Jim Comey a liar, they're not going to find many liars for that argument in the Congress. And indeed, if this becomes a credibility contest between the president and Director Comey, that's a contest that the president is going to lose.
Well, do you believe there are tapes of those conversations, 9 separate in-person and phone conversations between the president and Comey?
I don't know, but Congress needs to find out. We need to find out. I certainly want to find out. And I'm sure that Bob Mueller is going to want to find out. So that is one question that we needed to get to the bottom of, and perhaps that is something that Director Comey may have some awareness of. I hope he'll be asked that as well. My guess is he probably doesn't know, but if he does, that's something that ought to be shared with the Congress.
We've been talking a lot about Comey's upcoming testimony before the Senate Intelligence Committee. What's the next step for your committee, the House Intelligence Committee, your investigation?
Well, our next open hearing is going to be with Secretary Jay Johnson. We've already been in contact with him to schedule that testimony. He was one of the 3 agency heads at the time to make that first administration attribution that Russia was behind the hack. This was in October of last year, and that the hack was orchestrated at the highest levels of the Kremlin. He was also interfacing with state elections officials and can shed light on what we knew at the time about what the Russians were doing in terms of state voter registration databases or any other Russian intrusions. That's our next open hearing. We are also going to be bringing in witnesses in closed session for their interviews. We have been in the process of gathering the next steps for our investigation.
So those subpoenas that you've issued, are they all being honored?
Well, not yet. We expect them to be honored, or we'll have to escalate further in terms of whatever compulsory process is necessary. But our practice is we invite people to voluntarily provide documents and be interviewed. If they resist, we issue subpoenas. If they resist that, then we'll have to discuss next steps.
Finally, one last question before I let you go, Congressman. Have you read any of the contemporaneous memos that Comey wrote following his conversations with President Trump?
No, I haven't. Mr. Conaway and I have made a request of the FBI to obtain those memoranda. We have not received them yet. I certainly hope and expect that ultimately we will. I think that may be in the category of documents that the Bureau will want to discuss with Bob Mueller to make sure that his prosecutorial equities are protected. But that's information that Congress is ultimately going to need to get.
It was interesting, and I'm sure you noticed it as well. In his statement, in Comey's statement, he made a point of saying those memoranda were unclassified. That was a significant statement. I assume you agree.
Oh, absolutely. And more than that, Wolf, those conversations that are alleged to have taken place between the President and Directors Coates, as well as Rogers, those are also not classified, and there's no way to hide behind classification here. There may or may not be a claim of privilege. Even that, I think, has been waived. So there's no basis not to share this information ultimately with the Congress.
So you're going to subpoena that memorandum of the conversation that Admiral Rogers of the NSA had with the President? Because apparently there is a contemporaneous memorandum of that conversation.
I spoke with Director Rogers today. I made it clear to him that I expect that we're going to need to get these answers. I'm confident that we will, and I am going to assume the voluntary willingness to cooperate with us, and also I would be prepared to challenge any claim of executive privilege here, which I believe both shouldn't apply because we're talking about potential improper or criminal conduct, but also because I believe that privilege has been waived both by the President as well as by the witnesses today who are willing to talk to some degree about their interactions with the President.
So if they do claim executive privilege, you'll fight that?
Absolutely. We're going to have to fight that.
And you'll go to court?
I'd be prepared to support any court action. Obviously, this is something I would need to partner with Mr. Conaway on, but we certainly have a need for this information in terms of our investigation and whatever process is necessary to get to the